Hello, today's video is sponsored by DungeonFog, dungeonfog.com, that battle map creator extraordinaire. I use them in all of my videos, I work with them. That's how much I like DungeonFog as a map making tool. Not only is it quick and easy, but you can make some absolutely amazing maps, and there's even a very strong community where you can go find maps that you might need for your game. It is really simple to use, very dramatic in terms of being able to add lighting effects and all kinds of really cool options that keep being upgraded every month. There's new assets coming out, there's new things happening, there's lighting effects. It's really a great piece of software, and if you use the code GreatGM, you'll get a massive discount if you sign up for a subscription today. Anyway, big thanks to DungeonFog for making today's video possible. So I recently ran a session at CobbledCon Virtual Convention, and it was billed as a 2-hour adventure sequence, which we did in 2 hours, except it was not the adventure that I had planned. As a matter of fact, it was very different because the PCs broke it. Here is how. So CobbledCon approached me and said, would I run a game for them on their Sunday just before one of their main events? And I said, absolutely fine. I didn't know who my players were. I didn't even know how many players I had, but I needed to create an adventure. And I decided I was going to create an adventure using a particular map. And here are visuals of me busy drawing out that map. I designed it specifically to have a standard story of they have a starting point, and the particular starting point was a poem that I created and said you start on the beach at the beginning of the river, and you know that the tomb that you're looking for is at the end of the river. It was a straightforward setup. It's a one shot and it's only 2 hours long. Give me a break. So I designed the map in 3 very distinct sections, and you'll actually see how you'll see in the video. I've made 3 very distinct sections, and each section was supposed to be a different type of encounter, if you liked. I planned on a half-hour or 15-minute or so amount of dialogue and PC interaction. They were new PCs, they really were. They hadn't gamed with each other before, as far as I'm aware, and they certainly hadn't gamed with me before, so I didn't factor in a lot of chat time between the two of them, and besides, I had a lot of triggers available. If they left the river, they were going to get attacked by giant snakes. If they stayed in the river, they were going to get attacked by a giant undead crocodile, which kind of was going to set the tone. So they go on this journey, they defeat these creatures, and they find a giant portal that has been cast across this entire area. And when they journey through the portal, there was a very simple mechanic. Magic stops the portal from existing, and then it resumes a moment or two later. They cross into the next territory, which is a social encounter with a bunch of stick pygmy type will-o'-the-wisp pygmy thingies. I mean, they didn't really need it. I called them junglers, as a matter of fact. So they have all these, the social encounter with the junglers, where they have to convince them that they are here to liberate the junglers from the tomb of this particularly nasty undead known as Fangmaul. Now, this was a social encounter. It was meant to be a social encounter, and it's going to be a social challenge and a skill challenge and those kinds of things. That is what I had planned. It was triggered the moment they stepped through the portal, and then they would finally get to the tomb of Fangmaul, where there was a riddle, a puzzle, and then some traps that they would have to get through, and then they would have a showdown with Fangmaul and defeat him ultimately and be victorious. A ridiculously simple journey, except, oh yes, once they had defeated Fangmaul, the little stick figures, the junglers, were going to inform them that when they stepped through the portal, they actually stepped into a completely different world and were now stuck here until someone came to defeat them, because that was the cycle of the curse of Fangmaul, which they now had been put under because they had defeated Fangmaul. They had replaced him in his space. And there were some cryptic references to it in the actual poem that I had given them. Now, that was the long and short of it. It would then spur another adventure where they would try and figure out how to get out of here alive. That was the plan. The map was solid. I used Dungeon Fog to do the map in, and I think you'll agree it turned out to be a very beautiful map. I also very consciously decided to have it as one single long stretch of map because I didn't want the players to wander off in different directions. I wanted them to see that the map continued, and as a result, a little bit of metagame controlling there to keep them going in the right direction. So that was the map and that was the plot. The PCs then completely broke it about 10 minutes before the game started when they handed in their characters. Now, yes, the characters that they handed in, dear oh dear, one was a Yuan-Ti cold, Yuan-Ti True Blood, which meant they could speak to snakes. So my entire encounter with the snake combat, if they chose to go through the jungle, was completely scuppered because he would just talk to the snakes. Now, I am of the belief that if a slithery snake can talk to a giant humanoid snake who is clearly more powerful than them, they're not likely to attack. They're likely to go, well, yes, all right, fine. I mean, you could have some antagonism, but it would be a very far stretch, and I personally wouldn't like that. Okay, that's fine. So that now becomes a social encounter, and hopefully they still will fight the giant undead crocodile. Okay, all right, fine. Once they get to the social encounter, however, with the junglers, that's when all of the nonsense will happen, and it'll be great. And if the snakes are a social encounter and they don't fight the crocodile, they just walk to the jungler, then that's okay. The jungler become a violent encounter that they have to defeat. We need to have combat in here at some point, and it's a 2-hour block. Except that one of them, the other one, was a Warforged druid who had spent so much time as a druid that all of the mechanical parts had been replaced with wood, effectively making them a giant wooden jungler type dryad thing. And so that meant I was then facing a adventure of dialogue, a little bit of traps, and maybe a combat at the end. Not particularly exciting. There was the undead crocodile floating around, the crocodilian, I think I labeled it on the map, but not convinced. I was not convinced that that was going to be a strong enough kind of call. So we needed something to happen. And I forgot. We had no session 0, so that was okay. I needed to adjust my triggers. So I forgot that I had the power of the triggers, and so, yeah, I was in a little bit of a panic. I won't deny it. I was in a little bit of a panic. I was going, okay, well, what do I do? How do I get out of this? Where do I go? And then I remembered, well, hang on a moment. I'm going to be triggering things based on what they do. So I triggered, you're there. You can't actually get through the jungle. That was the very first thing that I did. I said, you can't actually walk through the jungle. It's so dense and it's going to take you months to get to where you want to go. So even when they convinced the snakes that the snakes shouldn't attack them, I socialized that they made some convincing rolls, they still had to follow the river. And what they then did was absolutely brilliant. They decided they were going to make a raft. And instead of saying, well, the time was going to take a long time, I said, no, that's fine. You make a raft, just give me a survival check. I don't think that was the right call to make personally. I think there were other checks we could go with, but survival made the most sense at the time. So they made this raft and then they start floating down the raft. There was a little bit of interaction going on, but we could then trigger that undead crocodile to attack them. I was then also aware, and this is where the time triggers come in, and hopefully you've seen last week's video, which actually talks about the time triggers, was that when the crocodile then attacked them, the combat was incredibly slow because they didn't want to get into the water. Now, thankfully, one of them failed their dexterity saving throw, and so ended up in the water with the crocodile. But one of the other players very cleverly decided to ask the snakes to fight on their behalf, and then when the snake said no, cast suggestion on the snakes. Snakes don't have a very high wisdom, and so then they went in and fought the crocodile. What it did was it allowed me to have some few moments of tense combat, and then the giant anaconda thing drags the crocodile away, effectively allowing what the players had been doing plus the triggers that I had set in motion to take effect, but in a slightly different way. When they then arrived at the junglers, the Vegapygmy stick folk people, the entire thing, of course, was then that their druid was a god. So I triggered that and went, okay, well, now I'm not entirely sure what to do, because I had thought, again, my mistake, that the druid could speak plant or plant speak. couldn't do it or didn't want to do it. So then I needed to figure out how they could communicate with each other, and I came up with a MacGuffin for that. And they get taken to the tomb. Now, they did the riddle in the tomb, set off the traps. They didn't even bother to check for the traps, so that's absolutely fine. But we were running out of time, so the confrontation with Fangmore needed to happen. Now, I had already set in motion this poem. I had triggered the poem, and they were following it through, and they were using it as a guide, and they had got to where they thought they had figured something out. Now, they had said, oh, I think this is what this means, this is what that means. And I went, well, that's what it does mean now. So when they cast light, it revealed this Fangmore. What I had actually intended was that when they cast light, Fangmore would be resurrected and would be even more powerful. But I didn't have time for the combat to actually happen. So instead, the light just revealed him rather than leaving him shadow, which kind of still fulfilled what the poem was talking about. And it caused the entire thing to happen. What had not happened, what I did not trigger, was the PCs discovering that they were now trapped in this death-like world. They didn't get that information, but I still wanted it to happen because I wanted the adventure to continue. So then all I did, spoiler alert, trap the PCs inside that tomb forever and a day because the junglers had now trapped them in there. And that kind of set in motion, it triggered what I was hoping to have happen, but at the same time kind of brought the whole thing to a rather fun conclusion, especially for a one-shot, except that all of them afterwards got hold of me and said, oh, we really want to play the second half of the adventure. We want to see where it goes. Well, it's not the second half of the adventure, it's the next adventure, but we really want to see where it goes. So it's interesting, the best laid plans that you can come up with using all of the techniques on this channel, your players are still going to break it the moment it happens, except that you have to realize that players break the game, spells break the game, all those wonderful, this breaks Dungeons and Dragons. Only if you're an idiot. If you know what you're doing, and if you have all of the plans that we've been talking about, and you know what triggers are, you can figure out as the game's going on, well, I didn't trigger that, I can trigger it here, I can do this there, I can do this there, and you can let it slide and just follow the journey, follow the adventure, and see where it ends up by controlling the game, which is ultimately your job. Anyway, until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of GMing. A huge thank you to my patrons who are busy scrolling up there, and to the sponsor of today's video. That is Dungeon Fog from dungeonfog.com, the best map-making software you can get on the internet. It really is the most comprehensive map maker, and I have spent many years making maps on this particular piece of software. That's a lie, the program's only been out for a year and a half, but in that year and a half it has seen so many assets added and developed, and I mean, it's just beautiful what you can do with this particular software. If you haven't yet got a subscription to Dungeon Fog, I suggest you head on over to their website, that's dungeonfog.com, and sign up today for your subscription. If you use the code GREATGM, you will get a discount on that subscription. But what a beautiful battle map, and so quick to make. And they've now even got templates, so you can just click on the template for Tavern, and then you get the template and you can fill it up as you like with all of the ornamentation. It's just brilliant. Just go get it. Go get it. Anyway, until next time, goodbye.